What is your weakness? This is one of the interview questions that most job seekers find difficult. While it is among the most common asked interview questions, most job interview candidates still find it really difficult to answer. So in this video, I want to take you through how you can answer this question in a job interview. So my name is Nelly and welcome back to another video. And if you're here for the first time, in this channel, we are all about learning as I share content around career, personal development, and professional development just to help you build a fulfilling and rewarding career. So welcome to this video, and if this is what you want to learn about, if you're struggling answering this question every time you go for a job interview, then I know you'll want to watch this video till the end. So in this video, I will take you through very important parts of this question. Number one, to get you to understand why an interviewer would ask this question. Have you ever asked yourself, why are they asking this question? I mean, why would they want to know my weakness? What does it have to do with this job? And I will also take you through how to answer this question and how not to answer this question. And I will also take you through what are the other ways, because not every time it's going to be asked in the same format. What are the other ways that this question can be asked? And as we end this video, I will give you a few examples which I would want to call bonus points, just to give you practical examples on how you can answer this question. So while we all know we have weaknesses, it is not really easy to speak about a weakness. In the previous video, I had talked about I had helped you to answer another common interview question, which is what is your strength? And I said that if really you find that in most cases this question comes as one. Somebody will ask you, or a panel will ask you, what are your greatest weaknesses and strengths, or what is your greatest weakness and strength? But I decided to split and do this in two videos so that I just attach each and every question to its relevant content, and just to give me time to be able to explain enough what each aspect on their own, or rather independently. So to get us started, one of the reasons that a panel will ask this question, or an interviewer will ask this question, number one, and which is the most obvious, is to understand if you have a weakness. And not that they don't know that you have a weakness. Of course, we all have weaknesses. They want to know that if you have a weakness and you've been able to acknowledge it, because there's a great power that lies in being able to acknowledge a weakness. Because you see, a weakness comes out as a negative thing, and really who would want to associate themselves with something that is negative? So that's why you find most people, it is human nature that we try to bring out the good in us every time. But the panel want to understand your weakness, because whether you like it or not, if you have a weakness in one way or the other, it will be affecting your job from time to time. So they want to get to know and get to understand to what extent can this weakness affect the job that you're interviewing for. They also want to understand that, yes, if you know your weakness, then what are you doing about it? Because I know everyone will be working. Of course, if you want to build, or rather if you want to overcome that weakness, you will be working towards making yourself better. You will be working on that weakness. So the panel want to understand, yes, you know your weakness. You've already acknowledged that you have that weakness, which is a good thing. Then what is it that you're doing to make it better? How are you working on it? What are the steps that you've taken to work on this weakness? So while answering this question, there are key things that you need to keep in mind. Number one, you need to ensure that the weakness that you mention in an interview does not interfere with the job. It should not interfere with your performance or your delivery in the job at any particular time. And how do you know this? The way you can be able to know that, the way you can be able to prevent yourself, or rather refrain from mentioning a weakness that will directly affect the job, is by going through the job description. So if you go through the job description, for instance, when we were speaking about strength in the previous video, we had said if you go through the job description, you'll check and see the strengths, the skills that the job is looking for, and just be able to align your answers. And it applies the same here as well. After going through the job description, you'll be able to tell those strengths that are required in the job. So for instance, if the job says that they want a good communicator, they want someone who's confident, they want someone who's detail oriented, they want someone who's analytical, someone who wants to work with numbers, you don't want to go to the extent of mentioning something that is in that list that is something that is required for that job. Like, let's say somebody is detail oriented, and now you come here and say, one of my key strengths is that I struggled with paying attention to details. Then really it is outright that this weakness will not enable you to perform the job. So that is why it is important that you go through the job description and understand. So you don't want to mention something that is a strength, something that is required as a strength in the job as your weakness. That one, you're already kicking yourself out automatically. Because if you say you're not a good communicator, and the job said clearly that one of the skills that are required is communication. If you say you're not a good communicator, then how will you even be able to deliver in that job? So it is important that you go through the job description, understand what the job description is looking for in terms of strength, and just be able to know that I can't mention this as a weakness. Even if you have it and you want to mention it, then it is not for that interview. So as we go along, you'll understand how you can be able to answer this question, and how you can be able to mention those weaknesses that will not affect how you will be assessed, or that will not affect your fit for the job. And as you answer this question, you need to ensure that you make a list of your weakness. So when you make a list of your weakness, then you're able to just again align it and compare and contrast it with the job description, or rather the job advert, to be able to just kick out those things that are required as strength that you don't want to mention as your weakness when you're answering this question. Another thing you need to consider, you need to be honest and demonstrate practically how you're currently working in this weakness. One of the mistakes that most candidates do is that when we are asked about our weaknesses, we do not answer honestly. We try to answer what we think the interviewer would want to hear, which may be an advantage or a disadvantage, because sometimes when it becomes like a common answer, and we're going to discuss that as we go along, it becomes a common answer that one answer that I find which is very common is when you ask what is your greatest weakness, then most candidates will say, I'm a perfectionist. I mean, while this is a weakness that most people will be having, but it has become so common in the ears of the interviewers or the recruiters. And the moment someone hears something like I'm a perfectionist, maybe you say another common that people say is that I'm impatient. You see those things, they begin to sound so unauthentic. They begin to sound like really it's a copy paste. Even for instance, if you're being interviewed like 10 people, the nine people had said, or even 8 or even 6 out of 9 had said, out of 10 had said I'm a perfectionist. Then you come and say I'm a perfectionist. So it becomes very common in the ears of the interviewer. So that is how, those are the things that you need to consider when you're answering this question. Now, how not to answer this question, which I believe is also very important. The mistakes that most candidates really do when answering this question. Number one thing is making a strength to appear like a weakness. And this is disguising a strength to appear as a weakness. And I think I just mentioned maybe an example previously where somebody wants to say, I'm impatient. You have a strength of patience and you want to twist it around. Now, the reason why this one might disadvantage you is because I said it is very common. It has become very common in the ears of the panelists, where they hear it every now and then. They hear people say it every day in, day out. So you don't want to make a strength appear as a weakness. Another mistake that people really make here is oversharing. I always believe that less is more. Less is really more, and you need to understand to what limit can I talk about a weakness. Because if you talk about a weakness too much and maybe really just get over to the point that it sounds like you're oversharing, you might mention something that was not supposed to be mentioned in that interview, and you might be thinking that you're answering well while you're disclosing some information that may work against you when the panel now sits down to just review how you answered that question. Another way that you should not answer this is by denying that you don't have a weakness. For real, there's no one who doesn't have a weakness. We all have weaknesses, and the greatest strength lies in acknowledging that you have a weakness. So never ever in an interview, if you're asked what is your greatest weakness or what is your weakness, please don't say that you don't have a weakness. So another way that this question can be asked is that this question of what is your strength, another way that it can be asked, maybe an interviewer can ask you, what would your former employer say, or what would your current employer say is your greatest weakness? Another way they can ask, what would your current colleagues or your former colleagues say is your greatest weakness? Another way they would ask you, what is your weakest skill? So you need to understand the different ways that this question can be asked, so that when you're asked, you're able to understand the exact context of the question. So now we are coming to the most important thing, and I know you're waiting and you really want to know then, with all this guide in terms of how to answer this question, how not to answer, the things that you should not mention, and why the interviewer is asking you this question. Now we've come to the point that I just want to demonstrate by giving you 2 examples of how you can answer this question in terms of just being able to talk about your weakness and talk about them confidently, and just to be able to mention what is it that you're doing about it. So example 1, let's take a weakness of not being detail oriented, or not paying attention to detail. But remember, you're only going to mention it if you had checked the job description and attention to detail is not one of the skills. Don't mention if it is not one of the strengths. Don't mention it if it is one of the strengths that are required. So you'll say, one of my greatest weaknesses is that I am not keen to details. I learned this over time when I was having to work on a lot of projects that required attention to detail. So one thing I have done is to always ensure that I proofread a document word by word, so that I'm able to pick out any detail that I might have missed, that can easily be missed, or that I might have missed mistakenly. So over time, I've been able to improve, and even in our last conversation, my line manager was able to acknowledge the fact that I've been able to improve in terms of paying attention to detail. This has also been evident by the number of errors that has reduced in my work, and this also has been evident in the number of, or in a great reduction of mistakes in my work. Example number 2, if you're asked this question, maybe let's use not being a good communicator or having poor communication skills as an example. Example 2, let's use inability to delegate tasks effectively as an example. So you can say, one of my greatest weakness is that I struggle with delegation. One of the reasons I realized that I was struggling with delegation is because I expected high standards when it comes to delivery of work. So I used to struggle delegating to my team, and I could find myself doing much of the work. So over time, I've been able to work on this weakness, and one of the things that I've been able to do is to learn to trust my team. I've also been able to equip my team with the skills that are required to do the tasks. So this helps me to be able to delegate, because nowadays if I delegate, I have trusted them to be able to deliver, because I believe they have the right capability and they have the right skills to deliver. This has been evident by the fact that nowadays I'm able to work on important tasks, and those ones that are not very important, or those ones that are not very complicated, I've been able to successfully delegate to my team. So you've seen how you can use a weakness that will really not affect the job. So for example, the example that I've given for delegation, you may want to give that type of example, especially if this is not a managerial role, because a managerial or a role that will require you to supervise people, because you realize that ability to delegate tasks is a very, very key skill, or is a very key strength that will be required of you if you're going to a managerial role, or if you're going to a supervisory position where you'll have people working, or rather where you'll have a team working under you. So you don't want to mention that you're poor at delegating tasks if you're interviewing for a manager role. So that is how you need to understand in what context can I use this weakness, in what context can I use this skill. So don't mention a skill, don't mention a weakness, or don't mention a strength that will disadvantage you at the end of the day. So I hope this really gives you a clear picture and a clear overview on how to answer this question, and I hope this is going to be important for your next interview. Thank you for watching. Thank you so much for watching, and as always, if you've not subscribed to this channel, please be sure to do so that you can always be notified every time I put out a similar content like this one. Thank you, and I will see you in the next video.